To create a barn truss, I need to select New in the Families category. Here I will go to my Imperial folder and scroll all the way down till I get to families that start with letter S and select Structural Trusses. This is the default truss family template that has two horizontal planes that define the height of the truss and vertical reference planes to define the truss length. Since this will be a barn truss, I will need another reference to set the height for the junction between the top chords. I'm going to draw this line somewhere in between the two existing reference planes, and also I will need two more vertical reference lines that they will be dimensioned relative to the center reference plane. I'm going to click EQ, which means equal, to make sure they are symmetric. For truss distance, I will do 22, and for the height dimension, which is a little bit too far, I would like to have it a little bit closer to my working area. I will set a dimension from the bottom reference of the truss to the reference line I just drew. When selected, this dimension can be turned into a parameter if I look right here at the top. I'm going to name it simply height. I will also put a dimension between the two horizontal lines and turn it into a parameter named simply length. If I want to change the height, I can click on the dimension value and type 7. Now I am ready to model my truss components, and I'm going to start with top chord. Starting at this intersection between these planes, I will extend to the intersection of these reference lines, and I want to make sure that my cursor snaps right at the intersection, and I know I click on the right place if my cursor points a purple X. And there is a little blue lock here that I will click to attach the end of the top chord to the vertical reference line. Using a line tool, I also need to attach and lock to the horizontal reference line. If I select the chord, I can see that it is locked to these two reference lines shown as continuous green line. There are three more chords I need to model, and in the same manner I will need to make sure I hit the intersection between planes and lock it on the vertical, and make sure I do the same on horizontal plane. Just to double check myself, I can select the chord to make sure it is locked. If I don't lock the joints of these chords to the reference lines and planes, when I modify the dimensions of the truss, the truss might explode. When I'm done modeling and locking all chords, I can go to the next step and set up a bottom chord from one end to another, and of course I need to lock it in place as well. Just for good measure, I will lock the bottom left end to the reference plane. A truss also needs webs, so I'm going to create one to match the reference line on the left and lock. And probably I am overlocking everything at this point, but I just want to make sure that my truss components are not getting scattered when I make changes to these truss dimensions. I also need another web on the right side that needs to be locked in place, and one to the top that will define the mansard height. There are a bunch of diagonal webs I also need to throw in this family, and all this can be further set to certain angles and parameters, but I won't go into that right now. It seems that when it comes to webs, they stay attached to the top and bottom of chords without a problem, and sometimes Revit will actually tell me when elements are over-constrained. I have few more diagonal webs to model, and just for this example, I am looking to place them in the middle of the chart, and I know I am in the middle because I see the purple triangle, even though when I will modify this truss, they won't be in the middle anymore. Now I'm done, I want to see how this family performs, so I will create a new construction project. To load the truss family, I need to go back and select Load into Project, and my cursor turned into a cross, meaning that I can draw the length of the truss. I believe if I go in the 3D view, I can show you how the truss looks like, and there it is. By default, in a construction project, my truss components are steel beams, meaning that I have to load some wood frame families that I can find in my libraries under structural framing in the wood folder, where I can select dimension lumber, and after I click open, I will select three different sizes: 2 by 4, 2 by 6, and 2 by 8. To see the truss better, I will set the level of detail to fine, display graphics to shaded, pan around a little bit to find a good view angle. Now to change the type of my truss components, I can go to Edit Type after I select the truss. Here I have top chords where I can change structural framing type to dimension lumber 2 by 6, and once I click Apply, I can see the changes take effect. If I wish, I can also change the angle of the top chords, and just as an example, I will set it to 90 degrees and click Apply. Now I will change it back to 0. Next category is vertical webs, and I will set framing type to dimension lumber 2 by 4. All the webs that are not vertical are called diagonal webs, and I will select 2 by 4 for here too, and for bottom chord I will choose a 2 by 8. And this is how I change truss components. Now I want to see if all components are consistent when changing type and height. If I go to type properties, down the list under dimensions, I can find height, and I will change it to 6. That looks pretty good. And then length, I will change it to 14. And after pressing apply, everything looks pretty good so far. Unfortunately, Revit shows a bunch of gaps between webs and chords, and I can fix this by selecting one web, right-click and go to Select all instances visible in view, and each one of these webs are pinned, meaning that I cannot modify them. But there is a tiny icon up here at the top that is called Unpin, and if I click, now I can extend each one of these webs, and I will fast forward because this will take a while to extend them all. Also, the tool called Coping will allow me to create notches at the intersections between webs and chords. The only problem is that I have to do this for every single element. Now I'm done with the coping tool, but I can still see some gaps. In order to reduce these gaps, I can select all instances in this view, and normally I should find something called coping in my properties panel on the left, and the reason why I cannot find it is because one of the selected elements has not been coped, which is this horizontal element. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply coping for this horizontal element as well. Now if I select again all 2 by 4s in this view, which are the webs, I can now see coping distance in the properties panel, and I will set it to 0. This error tells me that some elements have been coped, but they are not extending past the intersecting element, and this is the case for this vertical web. I will drag it all the way to the bottom chart, and I will do the same for the one on the right side. There is a gap as well between top and bottom chords because they are not 2 by 4, they are 2 by 6, and I also need to set the coping distance for this to 0 as well. If I set the level of detail to coarse, I can see the truss as just lines, and the chords are thicker lines while the webs are thinner. And all this can be modified in the visibility graphics overrides. If I select the truss in the properties panel, I can also find something called height, and I can set it to whatever I would like it to be.